Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Monday, September 30th. It is the day after a brutal 10-9 Jets loss to the Denver Broncos. Thank you, as always, for joining me today on the podcast, the day after edition of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast, episode 393. Usually these episodes, I'm a lot more calmer. I've got some more gathered thoughts. I usually 24 hours removed from the game, you start to look ahead to the next week. In this case, the Minnesota Vikings. And you kind of look at the game as a whole from a less frustrated, more calm standpoint. But I'll be honest, that's not what you're going to get today on the podcast. I am still heated from yesterday. I am still frustrated as all heck from yesterday. This is a team going into this year, after that New England win, you really thought things were different. You really felt like things were going in a different direction. And just when this team, like they've done for years and decades and all that stuff and games after game, just as this team has done forever now, they build you up just to bring you crashing down. And that's what happened yesterday at MetLife Stadium. So, as we always do on these day after podcasts, want to break down some more thoughts on Robert Saleh, more thoughts on Nathaniel Hackett, the coaching staff as a whole. Of course, we'll take a dive into some of the numbers, some ugly statistics from this game. We'll also break down just some other takeaways, take a look at some film clips from yesterday's game and all that stuff here on a day after episode of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. Now, before we begin, as always, let me tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS. BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook, is the place where you want to be betting all year long. Football season is in full swing, both the NFL and college football. MLB playoffs start tomorrow. You've got 2 Monday Night Football games tonight, so tons of betting action to be had. October is a awesome month for sports. So if you want to get in on the action, no better place to do it than with America's favorite online sports book. Plus, my viewers, use my link, which can be found in the description of this video, to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek. SeatGeek, if you haven't used it before, look at the ticket price, subtract $20 from that price when you use my code on your first purchase, Bubs on Sports, for $20 off. What makes SeatGeek so great is you don't have to look around trying to find the best deals. You don't have to look around figuring out if you're making the right decision or not on your tickets, if you're getting the right bang for your buck. SeatGeek tells you, look for the green dots on the seating chart. Those are the good deals. Those are the tickets you want to purchase. It makes it so easy for the buyer. And this isn't just for the Jets. This isn't just football. This is anything. Plays, concerts, shows. If you can buy a ticket for an event, SeatGeek has it. Bubs on Sports, off for $20 off your first purchase, and get yourself out to some great events. Also, our friends over at Huga House. You want an Aaron Rodgers special 20th season Huga House hat or any of the other awesome Huga House hats, use promo code BUBS for 15% off and get yourself some Huga House swag. All right, now on to today's podcast, episode 393. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. For those coming in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. And, of course, appreciate you all tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. Like I said, to open up the show, kind of in the quick minute opening statement there as we really dive into things today on the podcast. Typically after a loss, the rest of the Sunday or the rest of whatever day they lose on, it sucks. It stinks. It's awful. You're frustrated. You're heated. And then usually, you wake up the next morning, you're still frustrated. You kind of sleep on it, though. For somebody like me that goes back and watches the film, you kind of get not that you're usually calmer, but you're like, all right, as the day goes on, you start to move on a little bit. Mondays are always rough, but you start to move on a little bit, depending on how bad the loss is. And then you start to get ready, start to look ahead once the dust settles on the weekend, and start to look ahead, in this case, to the Minnesota Vikings. But I'll be honest, that's not the case today. I mean, I am just as frustrated if not more frustrated than I was yesterday, just because of the way, and especially when you watch the Bills get blown out on primetime and knowing where the New York Jets would be right now in the division if all they had to do was take care of business against the Denver Broncos and Bo Nix, who threw for 60 passing yards. I mean, it is just so infuriating. And usually I come on and I'm a lot calmer in these podcasts. Usually I come on the day after we look at the numbers, we break it down, give you some more takeaways from now, kind of 24 hours removed, not right after the game. But that's not the case. I am still heated. I am still fired up in a bad way from this one. I mean, this is just, like I said in the open, this is a loss that we've seen so many times. This is a loss that we've seen not only so many times as Jets fans over the years, all the different coaches that we've had, all the different regimes, but specifically Robert Saleh. This is a loss that we have seen from Robert Saleh time in and time out. And it's just so frustrating that you bring in Aaron Rodgers, you have this Hall of Fame quarterback, and yesterday was a prime opportunity to just blow out Denver. And here we are. We all thought going into the season, Aaron Rodgers, this quarterback, the talent on this team could overcome, could mask the issues on the coaching staff, which we all knew were there. And we all kind of gave a chance to Robert Saleh to say, hey, you haven't had a quarterback in your first 3 seasons. Here is a Hall of Fame quarterback in your 4th season. Go and do something with him. And after such a positive night on Thursday night where the Jets dominate New England for the first time in forever, beat them for the first time since 2015, you have a chance. It felt like they squashed the same old Jets narrative, and then you go out there yesterday and just lay an egg, and they weren't even prepared. And that's just the frustrating part because we've seen this so many times. Legitimately, when will this pain, when will this garbage, when will it end? I mean, when will it end? What more does this team need to do in terms of like Rodgers? And it's still, the coaching staff is just a disaster. It's a disaster. And it's the same stuff over and over and over again. And that's why I think I'm having such a tough time getting over this, because this was 2023. This was last year. And like I said in the podcast yesterday, in the post-game show, maybe this comes across as joking, but it's the truth. It's only fitting that this game happened with Zach Wilson in the building, because this had all the makings of a 2023 game where the offense doesn't do anything, the defense does good enough, and you walk out of there with a loss. This was literally the Jets-Giants game last year. Literally, to a T. The weather was also horrible. To a T. You had the Gano missed field goal. Jets had 24 seconds. They got that miracle big play from Zach. They won that game. It was the opposite. Literally the same game, though. It just can't keep happening, and somehow yet it does. So I want to break down some stuff with Robert Saleh and just some of the issues with him, and really just for some reason I can't wrap my head around it. How this is a guy, and look, I'm gonna bash Saleh here. I'm gonna crush him. We crushed him yesterday. We're all still rooting for him. We're all still rooting. Like, it's not like we're all hoping that Saleh fails. No, we all want Saleh to do well. We would love to see him prove us wrong, and this team becomes a lot more disciplined, and he starts to just become a better coach. This team gets more prepared. They start winning games consistently. We all love that, right? We all do. I mean, it would be a great way for the Jets to go out there in London and run all over and dominate Sam Darnold and the Vikings and hand them their first loss of the year. That'd be great. And if he does that, he'll get credit. But for right now, this is the same garbage we've seen under him. He hasn't made any improvements, and we have to beat him up for it. We have to crush him for it. Seems like a nice guy and everything. We've said that forever, but that doesn't matter in the NFL. You got to find ways to win. Doesn't matter if you're a nice guy. You got to find ways to win. He hasn't done that. And like I said, and I want to start with this, it's so mind-boggling to me how this coaching staff, because I don't want to just signal Robert Saleh out. Nathaniel Hackett is awful. The offensive coaching staff is awful. So I don't want to just, put Saleh all under the heat, because there is blame to go around. But This is the second loss under Saleh. I'm just going to rapid fire some numbers at you, where the New York Jets allowed 10 or fewer points and lost. The second time this has happened. The other time was the New England game 10-3 coming out of the bye week in 2022. They had that Bills win. Bye week came out, laid a dud in New England. Zach got benched. We all know the rest of the way. The only other team since 2021 to have more than 2 losses is New England. They have 3 of those games where the defense allowed 10 or fewer points. So there's that. Offense not doing anything. Team obviously not prepared. Ugly, ugly games. Ugly, ugly losses. That falls on the coach. You want to say Saleh, defense, fine. But what about the penalties? Not being prepared in these games. Not matching these other teams' energy. Always giving credit to the other team. I'm so sick and tired of that. Oh, got to give credit where credit's due. That's a good defense. This and that. Every single week, the Jets play a top 5 defense with the way Saleh talks about every single one of these teams. It's embarrassing. This is another thing, too. This is really what I have a tough time to wrap my mind around. Robert Saleh, 2-7 with extra time to prepare in games. With extra time to prepare, Robert Saleh is 2-7. Now, there is a quick exception with this. Those 2 wins came against the Giants last year. That game they should have lost. That was literally yesterday, except Greg Zuerlein missed the field goal this time. And in the Patriots last season, week 18. I mean, seriously, that game was meaningless. Bailey Zappi was their quarterback. So, realistically, he should be 1-8. Because that Giants game, they got so lucky. And also, that Patriots game with more time to prepare, you look back at the week prior, that's when Joe Flacco and the Browns clinched against them and blew them out on primetime Thursday Night Football. So, the win, it was a meaningless game, didn't even matter anyway. Pathetic. But that's another thing, too. You look at Robert Saleh, too, after buys. 2021, 3-9. 2022, 1-7. Including those 6 straight losses. 2023 was 4-7. He's 8-23 after bye weeks, and he's 2-7 with extra time to prepare, whether right after a bye week or coming off of a Thursday night mini bye. Or heck, even, I don't know if this was included in the stat, but even Sunday to a Monday night game where he's got that extra day. And he came just never ready to go. And yesterday was the worst of them all. A Broncos team with Bo Nix, a rookie at quarterback, in September going into your building. You had 10 days to prepare, coming off of 2 straight wins. They're on the road for the 2nd straight week. And let's not forget, the Broncos didn't even go home. They went to West Virginia. So you're facing a team that played in that practiced in West Virginia for a week. They haven't been home in 2 weeks, and you lose after having 10 days to prepare for a team with a rookie quarterback who hasn't thrown a touchdown going into yesterday's game. How pathetic, how much lower does this have to get? How much lower? I mean, how does this keep happening? So those are just some numbers there. And I also want to get to the penalties. And sorry if I'm all over the place because I'm still so fed up. I'm still so fed up from yesterday. This is a loss that it's going to come back to bite them. It's just going to come back. It's going to rear its ugly head at some point, and it's going to bite this team right in the rear end. It just is. I have a bad feeling, especially when you look at their upcoming schedule, which we'll talk about here in a second. But the penalties is a disgrace. And I want to throw this up here. This was Robert Saleh, a quote from Robert Saleh. If you go back to 2021, that Broncos game where they got shut out, ugly game on the road. If you remember, the next week they beat the Titans, and that was a Zach Wilson delusion game. And then they went to London the week after and didn't even show up, didn't even make the trip across the pond. So this was during the midst of all that, Zach Wilson's rookie year. To just show you that these penalties have been happening forever, here's what Robert Saleh said. Just silly penalties that don't need to happen. I'm with you on that one, and we know we're better than that and will be better. Saleh took the blame for the delay game call and what would have been a 56-yard field goal, yada, yada, yada. Matt Amendola not even on the team, although maybe he'll be better than Greg Zuerlein right now because Greg Zuerlein sucks right now. No other way to put it. But that was Robert Saleh in 2021. Now I'm going to play you a clip. Remember the quote here. Just silly penalties that don't need to happen. I'm with you on that one, and we know we'll be better, and we'll know we're better than that, and we'll be better. Okay, 2021, 3 weeks into his coaching career. All right, get it figured out. Fast forward almost 3 years later, because that was week 3. So almost exactly, actually a little over 3 years later, week 4, 2024, here was Saleh yesterday at the podium.
Robert, I think it was 15 penalties called on you guys, 13 accepted. I mean, what was going on? I mean,
a lot of them were pre-snap. I know we had a PI. I know we had the Allen had one on the celebration, but just a lot of pre-snap penalties, which is unacceptable. That's the stuff that we have to get that cleaned up. If we can't, you're always going to have in-play penalties. Those are going to happen, but the pre-snap and post-snap penalties, those are the ones that are unacceptable.
It's the same thing. It is the same broken head coach, doesn't know what he's doing, lack of accountability. 2021 will be better. Silly penalties. 2022, silly penalties, 2024, silly penalties, self-inflicted wounds, same garbage, same nonsense. Here was Saleh again this morning on the penalties a day after. Also still just stupid comments. Just a head coach that's lost, to put it simply.
Robert, when you went back and looked, what was the most alarming thing about the penalties?
Like I said yesterday, our operation had been good throughout camp and the first 3 weeks of the season. One good yesterday. There's obviously things that we just watching the tape, and we talked at length this morning already as a coaching staff, that there's definitely things that we can make better for the players.
It's the same thing. So I don't know, man. I don't know. Again, I want to. We all want to see this coach do well. We all want to see this team do well. I mean, we've said. I'll say it again, right? If Robert Saleh and this team's going down the Canyon of Heroes in February, hoisting the Lombardi, and by no means am I saying the season's over. No, but if he's going, that there'd be nothing more any other Jet fan would want. Like that's it. That's the dream scenario. We all want that. But if we're being honest, there's no signs that this is a coach that can do it. And yesterday was another example. We've seen this many times. And that's too, like, there might be some people watching this episode like, dude, you're overreacting. No, I'm not. These are things that have been happening every single year of his coaching tenure. And this year it's so much more focused because you're all in. You're win now. You can't waste games like this. This was supposed to be the cupcake part of your schedule, and you just lost to a team that isn't any good at home. And as I talked about yesterday on the podcast, Will Levis, they are so lucky Will Levis sucks, because otherwise they'd be 1-3 going into a 4-0 Minnesota team, a 3-1 Bills team, and a 3-1 Steelers team on the road. Saleh is very lucky that Will Levis isn't any good. He had that stupid interception and that dumb fumble that he was, whatever the heck he was trying to do on back-to-back plays. Very lucky. Very lucky. And in the middle of that, he had Jacoby Brissett and the Patriots. And by the way, I know it feels like forever ago, but this team also got out-coached on Monday Night Football, where they clearly weren't ready for Jordan Mason. They let Jordan Mason run all over them. And we all gave him a pass. It's week 1, tough game, NFC champs, fine. But they got out-coached too in that game. So, I mean, no way to put it. And I'm also, I want to give you some numbers here too. Penalties in 2023, the Jets had 124. That was most in the NFL. Fast forward a year later, 4 weeks in, the Jets have 31 penalties. That's 6th most in the NFL. So this is a team that is still highly penalized. And I wouldn't be surprised if this keeps up, if this is a team that is finding themselves back in the top 5, top 10, heck, number 1 in the NFL in penalties, if this coach continues to have a lack of accountability and go about his business the way he's been going about it. because obviously it hasn't worked. These discussions with coaches, we need to be better. All this nonsense. You got to figure something out, dude. Time's running out. Got to figure it out. Now, we talk about the lack of accountability. Saleh yesterday made a very dumb comment about it being on the cadence and Rodgers. And Rodgers in the press conference actually kind of snapped back at him a little bit. Not like, saying, oh, Saleh's dumb, but you read between the lines, he kind of snapped back at him a little bit. And Rodgers instead talk about taking accountability, holding players accountable, a little bit of a jab at the coaching staff, which is the right thing from Rodgers. Here was Rodgers yesterday kind of going against what Saleh said and talking about accountability, which this coaching staff does not have.
The cadence specifically, Robert said that might be something you guys have to dial back a little bit. Is that something you think could potentially help the situation?
It's one way to do it. The other way is hold them accountable. I mean, we haven't had an issue. We've had one false start. Morgan had one false start, I believe, until this. So, it's been a weapon. We use it every day in practice. We don't, we rarely have a false start. And to have, 5 today, it seemed like, 4 or 5. Yeah, it seems like an outlier. I don't know if we need to make mass changes based on, kind of an outlier game.
And that's 100% right. I mean, Rodgers is on the money. Hold players accountable. How does that sound, Coach? Rodgers' cadence, it's kind of sad that Saleh said that. I mean, this is a guy that in Green Bay, his cadence is a weapon. I mean, it's just like any other sport. Every player's got a weapon. Every player, every great player's got something that makes them great. In this case, it's Rodgers' cadence, right? Like now all of a sudden, he's with the Jets, like saying, oh, it's the cadence, something that he's been doing for years. We're going to change that now? No. Maybe look at yourself in the mirror and say, I have to do a better job. I have to hold players accountable instead of standing there on the sideline like a statue with your arms crossed, staring into space. Daydreaming. How does that sound? So, just sad. I'll say this too. How many more times do we need to hear self-inflicted wounds and miscommunication? All right, Saleh's excuse yesterday, or not excuse, but reasoning today, rather, on Cortland Sutton yesterday, who was wide open for that touchdown from Bo Nix, said it was miscommunication. Remember in 2022 when he said that after the Bengals game, every team has about 6 to 7 miscommunications a game? Are we serious? Miscommunication, self-inflicted wounds, same nonsense every single week, every single year. Miscommunication, it's the best receiver on the team. Hey, I don't know, somebody cover him. He's the number 1 receiver. Might be a good idea to cover him. Big body threat in the red zone. Let's put a body on him. Is it that hard? Is it that difficult? So, that too. And like I said, you look at the schedule coming up here from a coaching perspective. You look at the schedule coming up. The Jets face a Vikings team that is very well coached in Kevin O'Connell. They face a Bills team that is well coached. Sean McDermott, good coach, but also they're just immensely talented, great quarterback, all that stuff. And they're the top team in the division right now. Well-coached team. And in the Steelers, extremely well-coached. I don't know how Mike Tomlin does it every year. He finds a way. Justin Fields, whatever. You put me in at quarterback in Pittsburgh, they're probably a 9-win team. That's how Tomlin does it over there. So, I mean, Saleh's not even in the same stratosphere as those guys. Somehow he's in the same league, but he's not. So, that's Saleh. Got to be a whole lot better. And it's pathetic. And it falls on the coach. Falls on the coach. 13 accepted penalties yesterday. Go back to 2021. Silly mistakes. Oh, we'll get it fixed. 3 years later, a painful 3 years later, bad penalties. We need to we need to work on it. We had meetings. We need to do better. It's the same recycled garbage. And unfortunately, same performance that we've seen from this team for years. I want to move on to Nathaniel Hackett now, because he's another guy that I think deserves an immense amount of criticism yesterday. Look, you want to criticize Saleh 100%. The one thing you've got to say with Saleh, and we've said this forever now, he's got his hands on a defense that only allowed 10 points yesterday, and he's got a hands on a top 5 defense, of course. That's the one thing you can say, right? It's not like he's an offensive-minded coach where the offense has been awful all these years. He's got a hand on his top 5 defense. But with Hackett, that's not the case. Hackett's a guy that we went into the season. Rodgers. It's okay. They'll be better. The offense will be better. Rodgers will change everything, all this stuff. And here we are. And Hackett's terrible play calling is still right in the forefront. And that's I think the blunt reality we got yesterday with Jets fans. The first 3 weeks of the season, right? The loss against San Francisco was like, okay, first game, understandable. Frustrating as all heck to get blown out first game of the season, but first game, tough opponent. Okay. Week 2, you found a way to win. Week 3, you blew them out. You were on this trajectory. It was like, okay, everything's changing. But yesterday, it came back down to earth. Like, the coaching staff is still a really problem, but especially Nathaniel Hackett. A couple moments in yesterday's game where he had his head up his butt. The goal line. Yeah, you get the pass interference on Lazard, or against Lazard, and against the Broncos on Lazard. You get to the 1 yard line. First play, run with Brees. Nowhere to go. Second play, run with Brees. Goes nowhere. Third down and goal. From the 1 yard line, they bring in Braylon Allen. And they pass it. And what's hilarious on that play is they brought in Solomon Thomas and they tried to run. He was in the end zone. They were looking for Solomon Thomas. I mean, are we serious? Watching it back this morning, the Jets bring in Braylon Allen, third and goal. They pass it out of bounds. Nobody was there. They tried to run some dumb trick play with Solomon Thomas. I mean, how pathetic is that? You have a 240-pound, 6-foot running back, a guy that we haven't seen come into the league since Derrick Henry, who is still tearing it up, by the way. Huge night last night. And you're not using him in the right situations. They finally started using him a little bit, couple times, 3rd and 1. They had that 1 3rd and 1 run, went right up the middle. You even look at Brees' run yesterday. It wasn't even so much on the offensive line. It was more so there was a lane. Brees just didn't see it. Just give it to Braylon Allen. Don't think twice about it. You brought him in for those short yardage situations. Downhill runner. I mean, it's not rocket science. How stupid can you be? And that was the game. The Jets score that touchdown. They win. They win that game if they score. And then what is even worse, and this is just mind-numbing, you 4th and goal, and they get the stupid false start. Push them back, kick the field goal. And the red zone, was that not last year where the Jets would get into the red zone and they could not score? Yesterday, 2023 Jets, baby. Come get some. Jets football, come get some. Seriously? So there was that. And I want to play this clip here. Xavier Gipson. This was the 3rd and 10. On the drive where Rodgers got sacked, Will Lutz ended up missing the kick. Jets got the ball back. We all know what happens. But this was that drive where Rodgers ended up getting sacked on the 4th and 10. They obviously got the ball back with the missed kick, all that stuff. But here was the play. And I'll be able to talk over it. So they've got Gibson here. He throws it to Gibson. Gibson's got to turn over. It's got to be a back shoulder throw. Gibson continues just to run the go route. And you see it here from another angle. Rodgers gets it. Pretty good protection. Tries to find Gibson. Gibson just keeps going. He just keeps going. My question is, 3rd and 10. You're looking for a back shoulder. You're looking for a one-on-one ball. You're looking for a deep ball down the field, 3rd and 10. Big spot in the game. I don't know. Just a recommendation. Mike Williams, who had a very good game yesterday, bailed the Jets out a couple times where Rodgers was rolling out of the pocket on the run and found him a couple times, was the only guy open a handful of times. I don't know, Mike Williams. Where was Mike Williams on that play? Instead, you're setting up that play for what should be a play set up and designed for Mike Williams, a 6'4" receiver, physical. Instead, Nathaniel Hackett And his stupid play calling, his stupid play design sets it up for Xavier Gibson. 5'9", 190. Seriously, with the game on the line. And that's nothing against Xavier Gibson, his size. That's all. It all has to do with Nathaniel Hackett. We talk about these guys trying to, scheme guys open, put players in the right position. That's not putting Xavier Gibson in a position to succeed. That's not his type of route. That's not what he's here to do. That's why you signed Mike Williams. Where was he? He was on the sideline. In the biggest spot of the game, on the sideline. It just mind-numbing. Mind-numbing. Hackett's true colors yesterday came through once again. And that's a scary thing because we thought 3 weeks in, Rodgers was masking over all of it. There was still some concerns, but the play calling, I feel like, got a little bit better, right? They, early on, San Fran, Tennessee, they were still doing that run, pass. It wasn't going anywhere. Last week, you finally saw them open up the playbook. They passed early and often. Rodgers was rolling out. Things were flowing. Yesterday, right back down to reality. Right back down to reality. Gibson, by the way, and this leads me to my next point. He ranks 112th out of 116th qualified receivers right now in PFF grade with a 48.2 grade. So, and I know grade isn't the end all be all, but a pretty rough look there. Gibson's been the bottom of the league as a receiver. So my next question is where is Malachi Corley? And here is our great head coach on Malachi Corley this morning.
Corley, 0 snaps yesterday. What does he have to do to get on the field?
He just needs to continue to work. There's a group of receivers ahead of him, obviously, that are operating a little bit better than he is right now. But we as coaches also have to continue to work to develop them and get them ready to contribute to the offense.
So, yeah, he needs to continue to work. And there's guys ahead of him in the offense that are, too many guys ahead of him. So you're telling me you can't put Malachi Corley ahead of Xavier Gibson right now? This was the plan all along, by the way, to go out, play Gibson early in the season, let Corley get involved a little bit, but most likely kind of have him just watch and then start to ease him back into things or ease him into things. And Gibson's not doing anything. Now's the time. Your offense needs a jolt. Corley is the perfect speed, yak guy, physical too. Look what Braylon Allen's done in this offense. This Jets offense has needed a physical punch. Braylon Allen's been great. Corley is that same guy except that receiver. A physical, the yak king. And he's not out there. He's nowhere to be found. Seriously? And I'm not panicking on Corley, but this is where you start to get worried, as this was another one of these mid-round receiver draft picks that the Jets are just messing around with. Like, you're starting to get worried that this is going to be another one of these day 2 receivers that just does absolutely nothing. And it's not his fault. He's just not playing. The Jets aren't giving him any snaps. They said he was 4th on their board at receiver. The Jets were in love with Malachi Corley. In love with him. For good reason. He was a stud coming out of Western Kentucky. Love him. If you love him so much, why didn't he play yesterday? In a game, no adjustments. In a game where your offense isn't doing anything. The guy in front of him's not doing anything, Xavier Gibson. Try him out. Give him a shot. Give him a chance. Can't get any worse. And that's another thing I will say, too. The Jets couldn't adjust at halftime. You want to talk about the weather? Fine. Talk about the weather. It's a stupid excuse. But that excuse, too, is completely out the window. Because guess what? The Denver Broncos, the weather was still crappy in the second half. The Denver Broncos found a way to adjust at halftime. Bo Nix was significantly better in the second half. Their run game got going. They were better. You know who didn't adjust? This crappy coaching staff. And that's why we're talking about a 2-2 Jets team that just fell to Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos in September. Terrible on so many levels. I will also say this. and I apologize if I'm saying I will also say this. I got a lot on my mind. The run concepts are very vanilla. They're very simple. They're very basic. I've said this for a couple years now, even not even just with Hackett, but even in years prior, I've always said this. It always felt like the Jets run concepts are always very vanilla. There's no counters. They've done some pitches this year, which tosses, some HB tosses, which I don't know if they've. I don't know. I have the numbers right in front of me. There's been a couple ones that are successful. I mean, they did them a lot against San Fran. They weren't great. There's been some success there, but like no counters. It's always very vanilla. It's always up the middle, up left, up right. Like there's no, outside. It's all just HB dive right up the middle. There's no counters. Not a whole lot of I guess, creativity, if that makes sense. There just isn't. I think that's something that they've got to figure out a way. They won't because they haven't in a year. So there's no reason why now they'll change. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is, I guess. But they're very vanilla run concepts. And Braylon Allen's been great, but I think you could tell too, like Breece Hall is such a explosive player. And I know he hasn't been as explosive as he looks, but like maybe try and get him outside a little bit, try and get him to where he can get into space because that's where he really makes his money. He's not a guy that's going to break tackles. He's a guy that's going to make guys miss in space. He's a guy that's going to blow by you in space. Like try and get him out into space. We talked about this forever now. Like scheme guys open when it comes to receivers. Like play to your players, scheme to your players' strengths. So I don't know. That's something too that I think the Jets could get a little bit better with. And I'll fully admit, Breece Hall has not been good at all, but maybe they could help him out with trying to get some different run concepts because he has been facing a very high stack box rate because teams know what's coming. Like they know what's coming. Try and adjust. Try and adjust. I look at the defense, for example, right? They never blitzed. They adjusted it and have started to blitz. It's okay to get away with your normal plan. It's okay to adjust a little bit. It's okay. It's legal. It's legal. Nathaniel Hackett, it's allowed to adjust your offense. I know that might sound crazy. Oh my God, mind-boggling. We can change things, really? Yeah, you can. I mean, they don't, but you can. All right, and some other numbers. These are going to sting. If what I haven't said already for the last 37 minutes, which has been a whole lot of ranting, hasn't stung already, these will definitely sting. I'm just going to rattle them off. Bo Nix became the first quarterback in the Super Bowl era to win while averaging less than 2.5 yards per attempt with a minimum of 25 attempts. He finished the day, of course, 12 of 25 for 60 yards. He actually averaged 2.4 yards attempt, so under, of course. Nix didn't complete a pass beyond the line of scrimmage in the first half. He was 0 of 8 beyond the line of scrimmage in the first half. Nix is the first quarterback in the next-gen stats era, which I believe dates back to 2016, if I believe. I could be wrong, but I think it's maybe 2018. I don't know. It's pretty recent, but either way, within the last 6-7 years, he is the first quarterback to have a 0% success rate in the first half of a game. Nix went 4 for 9 in the second half for 64 yards and a touchdown. So obviously adjusted and obviously started to make some plays, which is sad and pathetic. But yeah, those are some Bo Nix numbers on top of the regular box score numbers, which saw him throw for 60 yards and somehow the Jets lost. I will also throw this up on the screen. This was Bo Nix's passing chart yesterday. That was his passing chart. Every morning after every game, I always, pull up next gen stats. I'll sometimes watch the dots, the highlights, and then I'll look at the charts and then I'll dive into the all 22 film. And looking at this morning just wanted to make me just want to vomit. I mean, the fact that this guy just beat the Jets on their home turf with this passing chart, are you serious? I mean, look at all, by the way, the white dots are incomplete. And that one blue dot is the touchdown to Cortland Sutton, which will be the easiest touchdown of his life because, hold on, miscommunication. Nobody was on their best receiver. Probably not a good idea. But back to this. I mean, look at all those incompletions beyond the line of scrimmage. He couldn't hit anything. Bo Nix yesterday couldn't hit a barn. Couldn't hit the side of a barn if he was right next to it. Or whatever the saying goes. I like Bo Nix yesterday couldn't. If he threw a boat, if he was in the middle of the ocean and threw a football off a boat, he couldn't hit water. He couldn't. But found a way to win. Chuckles in pain. Some other notes. This is Breece Hall's numbers yesterday. By far his worst game, and the numbers back it up. 10 rushes for 4 yards. He also had the 2 false starts. He had a 41.1 PFF grade, which was by far the worst in his career. God-awful numbers there. And his rushing EPA this season is at negative 15.5. That is awful. Awful. And I know people are scared to criticize Breece. They're also scared to criticize Garrett a little bit because they're the 2 stars on offense. They're the 2 2022 draft picks, all that stuff. But look, there's no defending him right now. Breece has been poor, and the Garrett Rodgers connection hasn't been good enough. It's been far from what we all thought it was going to be, and it needs to start to heat up quickly, especially with these games coming up. But back to Breece, he hasn't looked like he hasn't had the same burst. It seems like some of his vision hasn't been great. And I know you can't always freezing a film shot and saying, oh, run, he should have been here. Sometimes isn't always the best thing to do because you don't really know what exactly the play design was or where he was in that moment. But you look at, the all 22, watching it back this morning, you look at that first play against I think it was maybe either first down or second down. You look at one of those 2 runs he had against Denver on the 1 yard line. There was a gaping hole. There was a clear hole, and he ran right into the left side. And there was a run yesterday too with Breece where he could have cut it up and probably picked up 5 or 6. He had some blockers. Instead, Ruckert was on his guy, and he cut through them. Like he ran into the middle of them. And he went down. I did not understand that play. It made no sense. And watching it back this morning, he had a hole, he had a lane, he had room, but he ran into Ruckert and his blocker. It didn't make any sense. So his vision hasn't looked very good either. And that's been something that I think has been one of Breece's strengths is when he gets past the line of scrimmage, he finds holes, and when he has the vision where he can get to the second level, he's dangerous because that's where he's able to make guys miss in the open field, find openings, find holes, and that's where he's dangerous in space. But obviously, yesterday, not the case at all. So that is the stuff on Breece there. I want to also play this clip. Apologize. My screen froze here for a second. I also want to throw up some stats or throw up a clip here. This is the final Saleh clip. Celebrate. Final Saleh clip. On what he has seen from Breece and if he's concerned. Shocker, he's not.
Why do you think he hasn't gotten going yet? Is that an accurate assessment of where things stand right now with Breece? I mean, just what have you seen from him?
I feel like Breece had a couple of good, I know yesterday wasn't clean. It wasn't his best game, but I don't think there's an issue with Breece with regards to explosiveness and all that. He still has plenty of juice. His GPS numbers are fine. Just chalk it up to a bad day. Everyone has them and fully expect them to bounce back.
So he goes into the GPS numbers there, which he says are good. And then he also says chalk it up to a bad day. I don't really want to call it just a bad day. He hasn't been himself all year. I mean, his yards per carry have been drastically, actually concerningly low, if that's a word. 3.1 yards per carry this year. He averaged 4.5 last year and 5.8 in his 7 games in his rookie year. In his career as a 4.5 yards per carry guy, he's almost a whole yard and a half below his average yards per carry. I mean, he's almost below 3 yards per carry. You look at his yards per carry right now is 137th in the NFL. I mean, that's alarming. No other way to put it. It's alarming. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he's banged up. I wouldn't say he's banged up. I don't think he's hurt. And I don't like to always go red as a fan too. I know a lot of fans always say, "Oh, well, maybe he's hurt." I don't like to draw conclusions like that. I mean, if he was banged up, I'm sure we know about it. I don't really know where he'd be banged up. I mean, I know at training camp he was dealt with some lower body stuff at times, even during mini camp, maybe even as far as back as mini camp. But I mean, he was fine during training camp. Like he's looked fine during the season from a receiving standpoint. I mean, the great play against the Titans, like he's done some good things, but rushing wise, it hasn't been the same. So some tough stuff there that needs to be better. Also, Olu yesterday struggled a little bit. Not going to panic on him, but definitely a rough day. 39.4 PFF grade, 32 PFF run block grade, 5 pressures, 1 QB hit. So hopefully he bounces back against a Minnesota team in London. And also some numbers on Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. Rodgers' passer rating when target Garrett Wilson this season is 72.8. Everyone else is 99.6, which is alarming, that as well. And also, this is alarming. Fewest yards per target for a quarterback wide receiver duos this season. Rodgers and Wilson at 5.7 is 6th fewest. So something else that's alarming. The big players in offense, they've got to step up and be big-time playmakers. And Breece and Garrett haven't been so far. They have not been. So that's it. That's where things stand on the Jets. Gotta love the Jets. What a time. The life of a Jets fan. Am I right? You get all hyped up. I'm so glad, by the way, I did not go to yesterday's game. I was this close to going. This close. Saturday night, I was almost just about to purchase tickets. And part of what swayed me away for it was actually the price for parking. I got parking passes for the New England game for only like $60, $70. For some reason, this Denver game was $100. And ridiculous. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because I waited so long and maybe they jacked up because they know you need a parking pass in order to park to the game. Like that's not going to go down. Tickets will go down because people want to, just get rid of their tickets. But parking pass, like you need the parking. If that makes sense. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't make sense. Either way, parking pass was $100. So part of that, why I had contemplated taking the train, whatever. That was part of the reason I didn't go. Was the parking pass being $100. The tickets I could have probably got for about $90, which I paid $150 for week one, so it would have been a $60 cheaper, which is pretty good. But the parking was, bad. I mean, I would have $100 for parking would have basically eliminated what I paid for tickets because I all that money I would have been able to, I would have been able, tickets were relatively cheap because it was less than 24 hours. I was looking, it was like 7, 8 o'clock, and it was almost like 6, 7 o'clock at night before the game. I was ticket wise, they were tanking. People just trying to get rid of them at the last second. But the parking pass kind of swayed me, and I'm kind of glad it did because if I saw probably a $50 to $60 parking pass, I would 100% win, and I would be miserable. I would be more miserable than I am now because you would have sat, or even if they would have won, sitting in that rain all day would have been awful. You'd be soaking wet, and even with the tickets falling down to $90, it's still a $150 day plus paying tolls to get up there, plus sitting in an hour to 2 hours of traffic coming home. So don't even get me started. I could spend 48 minutes on that garbage, but I won't. I'll leave you here. That'll do it. Stay tuned. We'll have a lot more content coming your way this week as we head into a London game against the Vikings, which I am very worried about. I do not have much confidence going into this game. I'll be completely honest. But then again, Vikings are 4-0, so they're due, right? Anyway, we'll talk to you guys soon. Until next time. And as always, even through the tough times, JETS, 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 Jets.